All right, here we are. It is serverless office hours. Looky here, we have made it. We are live. Justin, Diego, how y'all doing?
Doing great. How are you?
Yeah, doing well.
Good.
And you?
Good. Hey, let me share my screen real quick here, and we were going to talk about today, what's going on today, and different things like that. Wrong screen. There we go. All right. So real quick, I'm going to bring up who you are, and then you can talk a little more about it. So this is Justin Callison. He's Senior Manager at AWS Step Functions. Diego Santiviago. I'm going to say it right, Diego. Ready? Santiviago.
Yeah.
Did I get it?
Perfect. Yep.
Okay. So a lot of people are like, sure, you got it. But they know I'm not even close. James Bezic. His last name is Bezic. It's spelled Beswick. I've told him over and over, and I say it wrong all the time, and I get called out. So these are my guests today. They're both from AWS Step Functions. Now, Justin, before we go any further, I have to ask you, what were you angry about when you took this picture?
Well, that was my first day, and I just showed up in this office. I wasn't planning. I was going out for lunch, and then they pulled me in, and I've been working here ever since. So.
Do you still have a job somewhere else, and they're waiting for you to come back from lunch?
Apparently, yeah.
Where is? How long have you been here?
Oh, almost 3 years now. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Same here. I'm 3 in October. But Diego's got seniority. How long you been here, Diego?
Yeah, almost 5 years next month.
Nice. All right. Hello, DC Abib from Brazil. Daniel joins us quite a bit. I'm glad you're here. Excited. For anybody else who's here, we are glad you're here. Today we're going to be talking about AWS Step Functions. And these are a couple of the experts. In my tweet, I said I got the heavies, but maybe it's better to say the experts, right? So so these are a couple of the expert heavies for Step Functions. So I'm going to talk about some of the things that we're doing and going about, but in just a few minutes, I want you to have your questions ready. I really honestly, and they don't know this, but this is a stump the chump. Let's see if we can stump these guys. No, but really honestly, bring your questions because these guys are the experts and they know what's going on. So I really encourage you to do that. You'll notice I have a different view today. I'm coming live to you from Phoenix, Arizona. And in a rare time, Phoenix, Arizona is overcast and rainy, and it's about 77 degrees out there. So it's been really nice. So I'm not down in my basement in Colorado. So, all right. So let's jump ahead here. So a couple of things. If you missed last week, how you doing? Julian and Talia, I just mixed those right together. They talked about the serverless patterns collection. If you're not familiar with that, something we advertise all the time, serverlessland.com/patterns. This is a great way to start with serverless. I'm pretty sure we've got some step function patterns in there as well. So what's up, everyone? I know Renee Goretzka. I hope I said that right. Glad you're here. Thanks for being here. All right, let's jump ahead here. One of the things we do is we aggregate. If you've not been to serverlessland.com, we aggregate a lot of the things that are going on. And this is our shortener, s12d.com/what's new. There's a lot of new things coming out. Cloud9 introduced a lot of features for browsing CloudWatch logs, S3, different things like that. Amplify, Amplify Geo and developer preview. And then, of course, if you hadn't heard last week, our AWS SAM pipelines. And there's a lot more you can read about what's new in serverless. If you want to go more in depth on serverless, kind of following, we have we have a blog writing machine in the DA team. And a lot of our, Julian writes a lot, Ben writes a lot, Talia writes a lot, James writes a lot. You'll notice I omitted myself. I write as much as I can. I do not write as fast as these people. James Bezic turns out a blog every 7 seconds in his sleep. I comfort myself by saying they're no good. That's a lie. They're phenomenal. So I encourage you to read the blogs that are coming out, including the latest. James is choosing between AWS service for streaming data workloads. That is a when do I choose SQS or when do I choose Kinesis type idea. And that's a question we get a lot. And there is some overlap, but there are some unique perspectives around those that help you choose which one, and James brings that out. And then, of course, Julian's well-architected serverless applications, building resiliency, part 2. If there's something you want in your service application, it is resiliency. Am I wrong, guys? Yeah, that's pretty straightforward. You want it to be up all the time. So James has his application, s12d.com/Alleycat. This talks, again, a lot about streaming, learning things there. And then one of the things we try to spread between 100 level to 400 level. Ben has this phenomenal series called Getting Started with Serverless for Developers at s12d.com/getting started. If you're missing these links, you're like, whoa, Eric, you're talking way too fast. That's true. I talk very fast, and I know that. It's okay. You can watch these back or go to serverlesslane.com, and these are all there. There's Julian's well-architected service applications. There's like 30 blogs in this. That's not true, but there are a lot of pieces in this series, and he's really diving deep on that. And finally, the serverless patterns collection, which we already talked about. And then today, what are we here to talk about today? And again, I'm gonna take the screen off and bring the guests up here. If I can get my mouse to work, there we go. And we're going to be talking about step functions. Now, before we do that, Justin, I'm going to ask you, what's the elevator pitch? When somebody, because we were talking about this before the stream, one of the things that we have is folks, when they hear about step functions, they go, whoa, this is really cool. But I think sometimes it's hard to grok the idea. So give me the elevator pitch. What do step functions do?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of ways to put that. I mean, visual workflows for modern applications is kind of the elevator pitch that we use. So when you're building technology, workflow is a very common part of what you need to build. And step functions being able to provide that in a serverless way and in a visual way is tremendously helpful in taking what are those business processes embedded in your applications, making them visual so you can see them and see what happened and rely on step functions to ensure they complete.
Okay. All right. Diego, is he right?
Yep, 100%.
Okay. That'd have been awesome. You're like, no, that's not it.
Diego tells me I'm wrong all the time. It's okay.
That's right. Just kick Justin out. And so, all right, Diego, you have anything that you want to add or any differences there?
So as your architecture grows, sometimes it starts getting too complex for you to manage. So if you have a Lambda and then you attach stuff to SNS and an event bridge, and then you lose that visualization of what's going on. Yeah. And step functions really comes in handy. So the ability to visualize what's going on, it's my favorite feature.
Yeah, and kind of echoing what y'all are saying, there are other ways to do it. And like any development, paradigm, serverless has many ways to approach things. And I myself am guilty of, a Lambda sending messages and 300 Lambdas orchestrated through, bucket triggers, right? All right, drop a file, now trigger, and realizing quickly that while there's, and going back, like what Julian says in well architected, while there are other ways to do it, what are the best ways to do it? And half the battle is maintenance and visualization, like you're talking about. But then the other side that I would throw in is a lot of what step functions takes out of your code, like error handling, decision making, things like that. So, can you expand on that? How much does step functions do there? Either one is fine if you want to jump in.
It can really simplify a lot of those pieces. You can allow the code that you do right to be really focused. Because as so I want to bring back, you mentioned reliability. Like another way to talk about step functions is reliable execution of multi-step processes using visual workflows. And so when you have these multi-step processes, having them execute reliably, you can ensure they're going to happen, that they're going to continue to happen. When there's a failure, that the right thing will happen. Putting that type of logic into the code that you write and deploy in your Fargate containers or in your Lambda functions really bloats it a lot. So you add a lot of that complexity. And so being able to just say, okay, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to allow a service that we provide to do that for me, really simplifies things. The other thing is it also simplifies your observability, where if you're writing this in Python, you don't need to figure out which logging framework to use, how to then aggregate those logs together. You can use the CloudWatch logs integration we have. You can use the X-ray tracing integration that we have, and you don't have to have those concerns. So again, the code that you write just becomes a lot more focused. And with our service integrations with DynamoDB, for example, you can even avoid having to have interaction with those services in your Lambda functions, where you can say, let's just pass the data into those things. They transform and do the things they want, and then pass it back, and then step functions can persist it. And then again, your Lambda functions become completely unit testable. And so it really just simplifies these pieces down into small components that are a lot easier to manage.
So Rob Sutter and I had this debate a ways back. And we've got questions coming in, by the way, so I'm going to stop talking in just a second, and we're going to get to the questions. I want to make sure we get that. But Rob Sutter and I used to have this debate, and I know you remember Rob. And
Yep.
Rob, if you're out there, hey, hello, how are you? He was a fan. He said every workload should have step functions in it. He said, just if you have a front end API gateway, it should always have step functions. And I fought him on that. I was like, no, I don't know about everything. But then y'all came out with Express synchronous workflows. And then it was like, maybe so. Because then I looked at that, because I looked at this and said, okay, if I can hit step functions, write to DynamoDB and get a response, and it's synchronous, which if you know me at all, I talk about you should always be asynchronous if possible. But sometimes you can't, right? Sometimes you need to be synchronous, and you need to wait for that response. So with the Synchronous Express workflow, the ability and the ability to talk directly, and a lot of people, I've had people ask me, are you anti-Lambda? I'm not anti-Lambda functions. I'm a huge fan of Lambda functions, but I'm a fan of the right tool for the right job. Or if you saw my tweet yesterday, right till for the right job, which I took a lot of heat for. I got a lot of farmer pictures come back to me. But so the right tool for the right job. In Ajay Nair, who's head of Lambda, the Lambda group there, he has always said Lambda functions should be to transform, not transport. And a lot of what step functions can handle that for you is that transformation, or I'm sorry, that transportation, moving those around, but also some transformation, right? I mean, you can change that state and what it looks like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, all right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to jump in and we're going to go to Doug here. We have our first question here. For long-lived step function execution, what are good practices to follow regarding DR strategies? Meaning, an execution has been going on for X number of days, and there is a failover. How might an execution be started in the DR region that continues?
So this is about when you've architected a cross-region. You have a cross-region architecture for your application.
I'm going to guess so. I'm reading to as much as I can, but yeah, I'm saying I would say yes.
Yeah, because first, the first thing to say is that within a region, just like other AWS services, we build in resiliency, and so we have a lot of redundancy behind the scenes that engineers work super hard to make sure that all of that is the case and we're stable in the region. But if you have a case where now you want to fail out of one region and into the other, you will need to architect that into your workflows. The thing to keep in mind is because step functions orchestrates other things, those other things need to come with it. So you would have to have thought that through and made a decision point. And I can think of a few ways that you would do it. One way that you might do it would be to use event bridge integration and to say when it's time for failover to stop those executions that were there, pick up those events that were there and use those in order to trigger the workflow on the other side to continue from where it was. So that's one way that you could do it. You could also, if you wanted to, use replicating data that's exported from the CloudWatch logs execution history if you wanted to move that across and have the full data to be able to pick up and do that. But we don't have any cross-region failover capabilities in step functions now on its own because it really depends on how you've architected your application.
Right. Okay. Very cool. And Doug did say yes. Diego, yeah, you want to add to that?
Yeah, the most important point is the one that Justin mentioned. So step functions cannot just migrate the state machine to the other region because maybe your lambdas are not there. And then it's just going to fail, right?
Mm-hmm. One thing that I think is an interesting pattern that I've talked to some customers looking at is to have rather than having a failover, to have an active-active configuration where you're able to direct your workload across these, and then you have them both up, and so that when there is a failure, it's not like a brand new thing. I think this is generally a good practice in DR. It's very dangerous. The spare tire being flat, which happens a lot, right? You need to use it, and now it doesn't work the way you need to. So if you want to rely on it, you want to use it all the time. So if I was architecting a multi-region architecture, that's the way that I would do it.
I have never heard that analogy, and yet it is really good. The spare tire being flat, that's really good. Yeah, I like that a lot.
That's a Charlie Bell one. So
thank you, Charlie. So this isn't a question, but I do like it. He says step functions makes it easy to modularize the code. Visual makes it easy to see the input and outputs, the tasks that are sequential versus parallel, and especially with the new workflow that y'all built. Yeah, it's just phenomenal. All right, so Diego, I'll throw this one at you. Humberto says, advice on how to manage service payload limits.
Step functions increased the limit to 256, I believe, last year.
That's KB in the state?
Yeah, it's from one state to the next one.
Okay.
And if you need to go over that, we usually recommend customers to save the data on S3 and just use the link between states.
Okay.
Another feature that we released, I believe last year as well, is the result selector, where you can just minimize the amount of data you send to the next state.
Okay. So if I understood you right, on those larger ones, to pass them around, a link to the S3 bucket, and then just grab the parts of the state that you want to shoot around. So, okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Very cool.
Correct.
Hopefully, Humberto, that makes sense. We got another question here. Well, you got a lot coming in. Is there any way to get certification coupons by watching these last? I should read the questions before I read them. Yes, no. There's not a way to get certification, but they are I think that's Shaggy Lord. So this would be the place to get it. So these are the experts. So I like that. That is only for cert power hours. Okay, Dan's telling that's only for cert power hours shows. So, all righty, he got the answer. All right, can we use step functions from Amplify? And I'm glad to take this, or if one of y'all want to take it,
go ahead.
All righty. So Amplify, Amplify, when we say Amplify, it can mean several things. But when you're talking about, I'm assuming you mean the framework that I launch API backends, things like that. I'm not sure they do a step function at the moment. However, you can separately build out step functions, and then you can call, code into your application to launch that. What I would do, the Wiz, is if you'll hit me on Twitter, I'm going to pull in Allie, who's our expert, Allie Spittle. She is our expert on this, and have her make sure I'm not, talking out of my armpit. But I would say that you might have to do it manually, but you can certainly use them from within Amplify, because Amplify controls that front end, but it might be a separate architecture, or you may have to go in and edit the actual templates that Amplify is generating. So, all right, got another one from Alper Codes. Says, how can we surface step function progress to the clients? For example, now executing task 1, parallel task done, etc. Is there a way to do that?
So I'll take this one. So, there are a few ways that you can do that. So one thing to keep in mind is, step functions has execution history, which will show the full history of the entire workflow. However, that is accessible through exporting it to CloudWatch logs, which is not the best place for the type of thing you're talking about. Also, you can call the API get execution history if you're using standard workflows to pull that in. But what I find is that likely the full workflow you have is not what the user would want to see. So if I was doing this, what I would look at doing is using something like EventBridge or some other way to call back and use the EventBridge service integration to deliver these, and then have those returned back to the client or made available so that you could provide that information. Or possibly you have another endpoint where you're updating status for those things in DynamoDB and they can query against it. But I think you want to build that into your workflow, because the workflow will have additional steps that you want to determine what the user sees.
All right, excellent. So is Alper Codes, he did do this. There's a way of getting around, and this is an example of using Lambda, S3, SFN. So this is a way of passing that payload around. Now we do have to do the disclaimer. Full disclosure, I contribute that pattern. So thank you, Alper Codes. We appreciate you contributed. That is pretty awesome. So all right, so we had another question here, and generally we don't talk about roadmap, but if you guys have anything you want to say about this, any plans to add more triggers or service integrations?
Yeah, so we hear this a lot from customers, and that's what guides our roadmap. So yeah, it is something that we're looking at. I don't have anything that I can share right now, but we have heard that feedback. We listen to our customers, and we're looking to see how we can improve in those areas.
Okay, awesome. So Sahil said scenario. So this goes back to the question I asked earlier. Sahil, I would look up above a scenario wanting more than 250 KB. So yeah, you would have to do the workaround with a S3. And really, I don't know if we'd say it's as much as a workaround as just a pattern. The way you do it. There are reasons we do the limits that we do.
You maybe share out the link to that blog. So the last time I was on here with you, Eric, I was talking through that example app that I built, and there's a blog post around it that really talks about this idea. So how do you achieve that broad level of parallelism? So if you take a look at this blog, it explains a lot about what's going on there. It also includes a link to a example project that's in GitHub that you can play through and look at that and get a more visceral understanding of how that works. And with this, hundreds of thousands of parallel executions are pretty easy to do.
Yep. All right. So I did post that link just so you know. You can see it on Silverland and Twitch. So if you're looking for that blog, there it is. All right. So I have another question for you, and this actually came in before the show, but I told him if you give me the question, I will ask the experts. So here's the question for you. It says, how do you define state machines with multi-level map operations to scale beyond the limits of parallel map executions? And I'm already lost. I'm not going to lie to you. I have a data processing step function, but I'm only seeing 50 Lambda functions executing at once when I'm converting months of data at a time.
Yeah. So Eric, that's the same answer as the previous one.
Okay.
Take a look at that blog post, and that's exactly what it helps to address is both the size of the payload as it will grow when you're processing, but also the level of parallelism. So there are a few different constraints in terms of how step functions works that you need to keep in mind when you're doing that. One is the payload limit that we talked about. So if you're passing in a payload that becomes too large, then you're going to need to manage that externally. We also have a limitation we need to keep in mind, which is 25,000 history entries in the execution history. So the workflows can last for a very long time, but there's a limit in terms of the total amount of payload that they can have there in order for you to actually be able to reasonably deal with that volume. And then there's the one that the questioner asked about, which is the amount of concurrency in map. So with map, we will have roughly 40 of those that will execute in parallel, after which it will hold additional iterations until the other one's complete. So the blog post explains these a little bit more, and it explains how you work with this, and it helps work through those constraints. But it also helps to explain why, when you have something that's that large, there's a lot of value in decomposing it into these smaller pieces, into reusable pieces. That makes it easier for you to tell what's happening and to manage through that. Because one single workflow execution that had millions of history entries would just be really, really unruly to manage and really difficult to deal with. So have a look at that blog post and look at the example application and hit me up if you have any questions. Okay, awesome. And you know what I'm going to do real quick here is I'll put your Twitter handle in. This is and Justin, I think that's right. Justin, at Justin Callison, right? I think so. Alrighty. Yeah. That's all right. Was that the day your angry picture was the day they gave you your Twitter handle? So, all right. Okay. Fair enough. No comment. And then, and I'm going to put Diego's in as well. And we're gonna it's Santiviago, right?
Yep.
Santiviago. Nice. Mm-hmm. I'm killing it. 2 for 2. All right. So really encourage you, and if you can't get a hold of one of these gentlemen, reach out to me on Twitter. As I always say, I don't know all the answers, but I know the folks who do. So glad to help you hunt down answers. Full disclosure, a lot of times we're not able to get right back. I get a lot of things come in on Twitter, and so I'm not able to get right back, but I try to get to all of them. So reach out to us. So Justin, I know we have probably some more questions coming in, and we do, but you had something you were going to show, right? Yeah, sure. So there's one of the things that we find with step functions is there's a lot of power there, and we want to make it easier for people to discover and be able to use that. Workflow Studio was a really big part of that, making it easier for people to understand and to work through and get started. But there's some other areas that I don't think we're still not doing a good enough job, and we need to find ways to do that. But I wanted to share a little bit about some of the things that you can do with step functions and ASL in order to handle and transform your data
that folks might not know about. So
Okay.
I wanted to give a show on that. So should I pop on screen and do
you
that?
ready for your screen? Yeah. I'll share your screen. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with, so here in GitHub, I have this example. You can actually play along at home if you want. There's a CloudFormation template that's available there. So I'm just going to go deploy this, and I'm going to use this as a way to kind of to also show some cool stuff that we did not too long ago, where now you can, let's see, let's go to demo here. Now you can define.
I just posted that repo in the chat if you're looking to follow along.
Awesome. So it's the same one that has the parallelism example. So I'm gonna, while this is going through, I'm just gonna pop over here. So what we did a little while ago is we added support for YAML, and so also directly in your CloudFormation template, rather than what you previously had to do in terms of building a string, is you can just define your whole state machine. I really like using SAM and put it into a separate file, which
there you go. There you go.
So
well done.
SAM. But the way I built this one is you can deploy this through SAM, or you can just take the template like I did, push it through, and off we go. We should be in business. Now I'm just going to jump over to step functions.
Just to be clear, I did not pay or ask Justin to say that. That was unsolicited.
I'm a SAM fan.
There you go. Yeah. Thank you very much. I love it.
Okay.
Diego, so, I haven't heard you say it yet, but we'll get there.
Yeah. Okay.
So what I'm going to do is show this. So this is obviously a relatively contrived little example, but hopefully helpful to kind of see how these things work. And so here's let me just fire this off and run one of these. You see now this thing runs, and I can see the results visually. This is the great part about step functions. So what's going on here? So the first thing I'm going to pop over here is in this first step that's called, generate a log message. I'm using the states.format intrinsic function. So this is a lot like the format function in Python, where you have a string with, you specify curly braces, and then you can have those replaced dynamically. And so you'll also see here, I'm using these references to the context object in step functions. So this is a great way for you to get dynamic access to information about your workflow execution as you're proceeding through. Super helpful. And so if I pop back into step functions, and I can see what did I get out of that, and here's what I'll see. So now you can see that message has this information embedded into it. It just shows how that states.format can be used. This is also really helpful. Say you're wanting to send a message to SNS, and you want to transform that and adjust what you're doing. States.format is super helpful. Okay, the next one I'm going to go to here is the states.array. So this is another thing that often happens. You oftentimes happen where there's impedance between input you get or output you get from one and input you need to get another in terms of whether there are in arrays or not. And so what states.array allows me to do is I can give call this with a list here, and these are just numbers from 1 to 10. And then when I look at the output for that, it's going to come back as an array. This is actually super handy for when you have this impedance, and otherwise, if you didn't have this, you'd have to say go to Lambda just to do that transformation. So it's super handy. Make sense so far?
Yeah. Can you go back to the code for a second?
Yeah, you bet.
Okay.
Cool.
So I just want to take a look at that. Okay. So all right. So you're literally just saying to convert this to an array, and you're passing values. Now, could I pass in a dynamic values there, or?
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So you can use that. All of these can be either literals or JSON path references.
Obviously, that makes sense. It's probably a silly question, but yeah, we need to be able to do that. So okay.
Yeah. No, it's a good question. Thanks. Okay. So then the next you'll see here, I'll just show the code here for this. So I'm using a couple other intrinsic functions we have, which do transformation to and from JSON. So this takes that array that I've passed in the previous one, converts it to a string, and then the next one just reverses that back to an array. So you see this JSON to string and the string to JSON functions. Okay. So I go here, I can see my input was the array, and I get back here a string. And then when I'm going here, I had my input was a string, and I get back the array. So obviously, this can be super helpful when you're trying to move between. Oftentimes, you'll have APIs, or your application may produce a string that contains that. It makes it a lot easier to go through that. So that's super handy too. Okay, I'm I'm then going to jump to this. So what I did here was, now you'll see this is a map state. And what it does is, I'm actually going to pop into the Workflow Studio to show you what I did here. We're all pretty excited about Workflow Studio and how it simplifies.
Yeah, that's so cool.
So now you can see here, it's a map state, and it just takes that array in. It then passes it to a choice. And in those choices, it's going to, let me look at this. Screen resolution is causing me trouble here.
Yeah, isn't that fun?
There we go. So what it'll do is basically say, okay, if this is a number, basically if they're odd numbers, create a dog. And if there are even numbers, create a cat. And when I say create a cat, what this will do is just simply generate output like this. So here you can see in the path states, you can generate dynamically the content that you pass through. So here I'm saying age should just be the value that came in from the array, which is one of those 1 to 10. It includes the name of the state that created it and the created by, and then it specifies the species as cat. So I'm just going to pop back out of here. Yes, I do want to leave. I'm going to run this again. And so when I go back here, you'll see the output for here was a dog created age 1. And then if I move to another iteration, you can see back and forth it goes here, and here was a cat with age 4. So, and then the ultimate output of this map state is an array of pets that were generated there. Make sense so far?
Yeah, it does. So let me, is this can I interrupt you for the moment and ask a question? Or you want me to wait a little bit? Okay.
Go ahead.
So going back to the actual ASL or the code there, the $sign. Talk to me about the $sign.
Yeah, that's part of the JSON path specification. Okay. So that just references the root and indicates that this is a JSON path reference. So single $signs indicate that. And an important part is, as you were saying, probably here, and this is a common area where we can get these wrong is, so here, if I have where's a good value? So here's my array. And so this is going to be either an intrinsic function, it'll be an intrinsic function or a JSON path reference. If I don't put the $suffix here, then we treat it as a literal. So if you want what's on the right side to be treated as a JSON path or intrinsic function, you need to indicate that with the $. On the key.
So if that wasn't there, I would just get the string states.array.
That's right. Yeah, and I might have done that a few times when I was building this.
But I'm not saying anything. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So here, this was more just a way to just kind of show how I can build some of this data dynamically. But this is actually the part that gets interesting, I think, anyway. So what I'm going to do is go back and show you what happens in the state that follows here. So here, what I'm going to now do is I'm going to say, okay, well, I have here this flat list of pets. But now I want to create separate lists where I break these up by young cats, by cats, and then by young and old. And what you'll see here is rather than just a straight reference, I'm using a JSON path expression. So what this does, it's a bit hard to follow here. You kind of have to stare at it for a little bit, but that's what the example code's there.
Yeah. Okay.
So what you see is it's saying, okay, well, pets is an array, and this is a filter expression, JSON path expression. What it says is, okay, well, I want to filter, so any items that are in there that have a property species equal to cat and have an age less than 5, then I want to include those. Here, it says I want where the species is cat and the age is greater than or equal to 5 to be old. And then similar for dogs. And so when I run that, and I go through here and I look at the output, now you see that output has been transformed. So now I've been able to create something that maybe is more helpful for the place I need to send it or the way I want to persist it. Now I have young cats here. You can see all of these are cats with age under 5. Here are the ones that are old and above that.
So we had a question in here, and it was an emphatic question from Atrice. JSON path filters are supported. I would say yes.
Yes.
So and I'd be curious to see how many of y'all that's surprised, because I think that's awesome. The power of being able to do that without having to eject to a Lambda function and come back. You're saving a lot of code, right? You're saving having to jump out, jump back, things like that. That is incredible.
Greatly simplifies.
Yeah, it does. Now we had this pop up, and this one gets me too. What about the $2 signs?
Yeah.
Sorry to jump back and forth, but I want to cover that.
I'm going to let Diego answer that, because he was
Diego.
the person who implemented this in the beginning.
Nice.
Yeah. For the dollar sign, as Justin said, it refers to the input of your state. So it's the root content of your input. And customer asks us to access information about the execution. So I want to know what's my execution name. I want to know what's the state machine. And maybe I also want to access information about when it started and so on. So once the step function sees a $, that means I'm trying to read information from the context object. And the context object belongs to that execution and also has information about the state machine, the state you are in. And what is amazing is that it also includes something called test token.
Okay.
And yeah, it's an ID that refers to that task, and it can be used to a pattern called callback pattern. And what it does is basically runs your execution, then it stops on that state and waits for an external event to happen. So the execution is going to wait for you to call back step functions and tell us that you are done with either success or failure.
Mm-hmm.
All right, very cool. And I've just posted, Justin gave us a link. Excuse me, I just posted that as well. So, all right, so I'm going to back up. Go ahead, Justin.
So I just wanted to there are a couple more things I wanted to show in this example, but if you had another question about that, go ahead there.
Not about that specific. So no, go ahead. And we do have a couple other questions coming in, but I'll jump to them afterwards. So.
Okay, I'll try to rip through this. If you can go back to the screen quickly there.
You're right. Yeah.
All right. So we saw what we did there. The next thing that I showed here is like, okay, well, here what I wanted to do is also, I want to just get a list of the unique ages that are included. So here I'm using a JSON path filter that's saying JSON path expression. So I'm looking for anything that matches age throughout the entire. And so if I look at the output of this one, I still have my pets object, but I also now have all of those unique ages, because of what it did, went through, found anything that managed aged, and then added that to the array. The next one that I did here was then add something to flatten all of these things back. So it is able to go multiple levels, find all of those objects, and then include them back into an array. And when I see here, now, where is it? I have the grouped pets here, and now I have the flattened ones that have been brought back. So this is just an example. It's out there on GitHub. You can play with it just to kind of show some of the things you can do, and probably avoid some unhelpful code that you're writing in Lambda to change your state.
Yeah, awesome, dude. This is really cool stuff, and some stuff I'm learning here as well. I am not a JSON path expert, but I do understand the power of it, and the fact that it's in there, it saves a ton of time. Very cool.
Yeah.
All right, we have a question coming in here. I'm gonna roll back a little bit. Is there any plan to resume an AWS step function from any state?
Same answer as before. We get a lot of feedback on this. It's something that we're looking into. I don't have anything concrete plans that I can share right now.
Gotcha. Okay. All righty. So another question come in here, real quick here. Okay. And you may not have this, but maybe we can link it up. It says, do you have any working examples of calling an ECS Fargate task from a step functions task? Maybe you do have that.
Yeah. What I'm doing here is I'm just going to go. So in the console for step functions, we have these sample projects that have a lot of really interesting and helpful cases just to get going on. So you can look through and see a bunch of these. I'm going to find, where is our, here it is, this example. And so you can do this, run it. It's going to take a little bit because it's got to deploy a bunch of stuff behind the scenes.
Okay.
So we don't need to keep showing this, but this is what I would suggest to get started. Go use that sample project, have a look at how it's done there. It's a great way to get started.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to throw this one at you, Diego. Says, I get sometimes confused when to use callback patterns and when to use sync. Can you advise when to use one and when to use the other?
Yeah, definitely. So the dot sync pattern, it is, so let's say you have an asynchronous process. You're running something on batch. And batch is going to complete whatever you're running in 30 minutes. The magic of this dot sync pattern is to make this asynchronous process to behave like synchronous. So previously, before that feature, on your state machine, you would need something called job poller. So start batch and then move to the next state, call Lambda, describe the job status if it's not completed, and then you keep polling until it's completed. And basically, you pay the state transitions for 30 minutes, right? All the state transitions while you keep polling. With the dot sync, we listen for the event bridge event on your account. So we use something called manage roles that delivers the events through step functions. And we keep listening for those events. So once your job is completed, we will automatically get the output, insert on your execution, and move on. And that consumes just one state transition instead of 30 minutes of job pollers.
Right. Okay.
And for the callbacks, there is no event associated. So you're telling step functions, hey, I want you to stop, and I will be responsible for letting you know that I'm done with my work. So that's usually for customers that have process. It can be outside AWS. So they get an ID, which is called test token, and then they run the process. And with that test token, they call back step function saying, hey, I'm done, and this is my the output of my task. And they have two different APIs to let us know whether it succeeded or not. So step function, we don't know what we are doing. We are just orchestrating your process and let you to make the decisions and move on.
Awesome. All right. So he'll hope that answers. If not, go ahead and post it in there and we can try to expand on that. We got another one here coming in. It says, is it possible to write an entire step function with expressions in ASL? However, so that's a statement. So the question is, however, it is not to debug or unit test it, is it? So I guess the question is, and I have the same thing, is how do you approach testing, unit testing when you're building a lot of this in ASL?
The local runner for step functions is the best option there. Okay. So you can download that. It's available direct download runner as a Docker container. And then you can run that locally. And using Lambda, there's an ability to mock those out. And so that's really the best way to do that right now.
All righty. I'm grabbing the link to that as we speak. All right. Okay. Now, it looks like that answered the question for Sahil. Thank you very much. All right. So I have a question for y'all. Again, this one came in outside. Said, when should I use, and then again, this is the overlap and, kind of doing that, but it says, when should I use step functions versus using like SNS invoking Lambda or Event Bridge to send events between different parts of my application? There's overlap. How do folks choose one over the other?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think there are a number of things that come into that. Certainly there will often be preferences or other parts of your architecture that have a given pattern to them. So, in the end, we provide choice for customers to do that. But it's an interesting topic. Some people describe this as a difference between choreography and orchestration. Choreography being, completely event-driven, where events are consumed and then sent back, and they're just independently choreographed through that event bus, or orchestration with what step functions does. And my typical answer is like, should I use choreography or orchestration? And the answer is yes. You should use both. The places where, in general, you'll find benefit for the choreography aspect is where those things that are happening are really independent within your application. So you do want that independence, and that's a great way. Step Functions has great integrations with Event Bridge, which we automatically generate events at the start and completion of an execution. Also, you can send directly to them. But if you have something that's sort of, if you're a domain-driven design person, kind of within a bounded context, where you really need a certain set of things to happen that are atomic and that have several steps, doing that via the choreography can just get really difficult to follow. Yeah. And so that's in the area where I think a workflow can really be helpful. So we see lots of customers using these together, and it's that's how I think about the choices.
I can't tell you how many times I build it all out and then go, man, I should have used step functions. And I go back. So now I look at it and go, how big is this going to get? And always, because they always get bigger than mine, because I love, okay, I've got this working. Yeah. I could translate that for folks, or I could transcribe this, or I could, whatever. And so there's that, that orchestration. I'll tell you what I'd like to see, Justin. I'm saying this out in public, so I get the choice. I'd like to see step functions integrate with the AI ML stuff.
Yeah,
I think that would be huge.
We see a lot of customers using step functions for AI ML, directly using it. We also, Netflix is a really cool framework called Metaflow that can optionally use step functions as the scheduler for it. So yeah, we hear that a lot. We see a lot of customers doing that, and that's a good suggestion. We've heard that from others as well. It's a really common use case because AI ML typically involves a lot of data processing for preparation, as well as using some of the higher level services we provide. I'll use this as a chance to do the shout out as well for our data science SDK. So people are using data science and doing that stuff. They're usually working in Python, and so this is something we launched a little while ago, which allows you to write your workflows in Python, and it will run in a Jupyter notebook. And so it's a really cool integration for those people who are working in that space.
That's sweet. So personal story. I'm a Node developer. Well, that's using developer pretty loosely, but I'm a Node developer. That's what I use, but I tend, but I'm learning Python. So I'm building, I was telling you guys before the stream, I'm building this project. So I'm learning the AI ML stuff. I'm learning the Python stuff. I'm learning. So it's been an absolute blast, but I'm seeing the power of that, and what you just described would be huge. So,
yeah.
All right. Let's see if we have any other questions coming in here. Real quick, and I've got some links I'm going to post here. Diego's been getting us some links really good. So Diego, I have a question for you, and this is a softball one, I know, but I think folks get confused on that. Talk to me about the difference between standard workflows and express workflows, and when would you choose one over the other? What are they, and when would you choose them?
Mm-hmm. So the main difference between standard and express is that standard is for long-running workflows. They can last for a year, and express workflows is up to 5 minutes. And there are other implications as well. So the standard, we kind of guarantee that we are not going to call your Lambda twice unless requested. And for express, you may see duplications.
Okay. All righty. So is that,
yep.
So let's talk about this. So you said we kind of guarantee. So I want to make sure. So are we saying it's a one time only, or is it at least? So one is one time and the other is at least once, right?
Well, that's the thing. There's actually no such thing.
And that's what I want to make sure we're talking clearly. So so we get okay.
So Kuba, one of our PEs, is also always on this, and I know we describe it as at exactly once to make it simple, but in reality, in a distributed system, there's no such thing. You either have at most once or at least once in these systems, and so standard workflows does an at most once execution model, and we don't do retries of your service integration calls. We don't do any of those, and if there's a failure, then we make sure that it comes back to your workflow and you make that decision. Whereas, as Diego said, Express has an at least once where we will often have that. And the benefits, so those are some of the behavior changes that are there. But why, and that might, on the surface, you might say, okay, why are those different? A lot of it is to allow us to deliver the cost and the scalability characteristics that Express provides. So because in order to have that at most once model, trust me, there's a lot of fancy stuff that has to happen behind the scenes to do that in a distributed environment. It's a very difficult problem, one we love to tackle. By relaxing that, what we're allowed to do is simplify this, and we can then scale. So like Express, we can have much higher rates for invocations, and so it's really built for handling like event processing and really high volume use cases. Super good for that, and it has pricing that sort of follows the way that Lambda works. So it really fits naturally in that model.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. Another point is we also launched synchronous executions that's supported on Express. So customers love Express because it's way cheaper and way faster. but they don't want to query CloudWatch logs to see what was the output of the execution. So they just want to run something very quick, maybe a few hundred milliseconds, and they want the output. So we worked on that. We shipped synchronous executions, and that allows use case where customers can use for a combination with API gateway. So we have some customers that included step functions as part of the API handling. So they have pre-processing workflows and post-processing workflows and the API handling in the middle. So they're doing a lot of things with synchronous workflows. It's very useful.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And I've got some examples on Sessions with Sam, which I'll post a link to shortly, where I walk through, my go-to was always API gateway, Lambda function, DynamoDB. That's my backend, right? But now API gateway, step functions, DynamoDB, and now I'm not writing any code or very little code. I'm configuring, and I may do some transformation with the JSON path, but and latency, and I want to be careful when I say this, but I saw no latency difference, right? It's very fast, right? Or negligible, if any. Would you say it's as fast as going through a Lambda? And I'm not trying to pin you down, but general numbers.
So it depends on what you're doing.
Okay.
We ran a bunch of tests to compare when we were developing. And for a bunch of cases, just using step functions was faster than Lambda, and for multiple reasons.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So,
well, a lot of it is. Sorry, go ahead.
So one thing that we should consider when writing a Lambda is it's very easy just to write code and deploy and use Lambda, right? But that's the direct cost of maintaining your Lambda.
Mm-hmm.
Once you have a Lambda deploy in production, it means you need to maintain deployments, you need monitoring, you need logs, you need alarms, you need to watch per metrics. And then Python just comes in and says nobody can use 2.7 anymore, it's deprecated. So you have those thousands of Lambdas now that you need to migrate the code and test and deploy. So this adds a lot of operations on your side. And when you're using step functions, we manage all of that for you. We make those integrations for you and we maintain, right? So if you can avoid, just rely on step functions and we'll do most of it for you.
Yeah, and I think with this, the way I think about this is, I've been passionate about serverless from the start. Just such an amazing idea, but we do see a lot of customers as they start to move forward with it, the complexity starts to become a challenge for them. And so, Lambda powers all of this and is it's so powerful and so amazing. But what we want to make sure is that customers use those Lambda functions for the right pieces and simplify it, so they don't get into this place where they say, hey, we love this, we love Lambda, we're doing all this stuff, but man, there are just too many functions for me to deal with, and I'm starting to sort of feel the complexity. So what this helps to do is to remove that unnecessary complexity and allow you to get the greatest power out of Lambda and the other services that we have in AWS.
Yeah, well said, both of you. I think that was great. Hey, I'm going to try to grab two more questions if we can. How do you get the graph inspector to show up during step functions execution? I'm running a Synchronous Express workflow and it's not showing up after I start an execution. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that's because one of the differences I mentioned with Express is we don't store the history in the step function service, so it's not supported. It's part of the way that it works. That data can be viewed through CloudWatch logs with that integration turned on.
There you go. Express function doesn't get fancy. We just get it. So yeah, that's good. All right. So yeah, I think that's so we have this example of and I don't know if y'all have any examples out there. So an example of reading Express workflow logs transformed to JSON from JSON string, that kind of thing. Anywhere you'd point someone?
I don't have anything offhand.
Okay.
Sorry, I can't help with that one.
Okay. Yep. Idris, if you want to hit me on Twitter, we'll see if we can find you something. But I don't know anything offhand as well. So, yeah, Alper Codes has said here you can switch to standard, get the UI once C is working, then switch back to Express. Would you all recommend that?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
The nice thing about the way we support Express and standard, there are differences and certain things you need to be aware of. But anything that you can run in Express, you can run in standard.
Yeah.
There are some things you can run in standard that you can't run in Express. So there are a few caveats there, but going from Express to standard is completely compatible.
Yeah. He did correct. Apparently, I said one CE is working, but that should be once it is working. That was my bad. So
you got an editor here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was like, well, when I read that, I don't know what CE is, but I'll read it. So thank you, Coach, for clearing that up. And maybe we are having issues. I'm getting issues hitting Twitch. So we may have lost to Twitch, but we're going to YouTube, so we'll put this live. With that, we'll call it, since I don't know, we may have lost our connection here. So, but if you're still out there, Justin, I want to thank you. Diego, I want to thank you. These are always great. Lots of great questions and answers. Hopefully we covered anything. Do you want to shout out anything before we go?
No, thanks for driving, and thanks for coming here, and thanks for having us. The team we got a whole team of people who are just super passionate about the contribution that Step Function can make to serverless, and it's great to get a chance to share this out there and to hear about people who are using it to solve real problems. Awesome.
Yeah. Diego, you want to throw anything out?
Yeah, I just want to emphasize what Justin said. We listen to customers and for features that you request. I can guarantee we are taking a look on that and doing our best to ship them.
All right. I'm going to grab one more question. Twitch is working. We do seem to be okay. Do y'all know of any examples that show how to use step functions with the streaming data?
With streaming data?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of examples off the top of my head. I think James might have put something out around this.
Yeah, I think so too. Sahil, if you'll hit me on Twitter, and I'm sure I'm not saying your name wrong, right? So, apologies up front. But if you'll hit me on Twitter, I'll hook you up with James Bezic, and he has some stuff around that. Absolutely. So
quickly though, one pattern that's going to be common there is this is part of why we built Express, and there's an integration between step functions and Event Bridge. And so if you can source streaming data through to EventBridge, and there are, like with DynamoDB Streams is an example of where we have something that's been launched recently, you can set that up and just have it run for you. So that's one example.
Yeah, another note to what Justin said is you can combine standard workflows with Express workflows. And you can have those nested workflows to report back to the parent state machine. So let's say you have a standard state machine and you want to run a really fast map and multiple executions and so on. You can offload that to Express, and we have an example called selective checkpointing. That's how we call, because the part of your state machine that's offloaded to Express, it's just persistent in memory to be fast and so on, and cheaper. And it's on our documentation.
Nice. All right, one other question we had come in that's not up here, but I got it beforehand, and I'm just going to post a link, and then we're going to need to jump. What does ASL look like inside of SAM? I know Justin and I talked about this a little bit. There's an example. This particular application. That is the wrong link. One moment, please. Ignore that link. And if you're watching this afterwards, I'm so sorry. Here's an example that I built that actually provides you with using step functions. It provides you with the ability to build signed URLs for both upload and download, and then it provides a URL shortener for those if you want them. And there you go. And that's connection to the SAM one, but if you back out and go, there's also a CDK example. So doing step functions within CDK or SAM, it works. Choice, and you can have an external ASL file with SAM. So, yeah.
Those the repos. The parallelism example is in a GitHub repo that has those apps are all in SAM, so you can look at those as well.
Awesome. All right, with that, I think we're going to need to call it. Again, Justin, Diego, this was awesome. Y'all are full of information, and I appreciate you being on this. Next week on Serverless Office Hours, You asked for it, you get it. We're doing the cores episode, cross-origin resource scripting. I've said it from a stage in front of thousands of people. If cores had a face, I'd punch it in the nose. Okay, cores is hard. There's just no two ways about it. So next week, I'm going to be talking about cores and how to set it up with API Gateway and get that going. So with that, I'm going to end this. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week, same time, same place. Justin, Diego, thanks a lot. You bet.
Thanks, folks.